Hey everybody, it's Miss Coretto, and I am going to finish out our reproduction topic today by talking about some interesting facts that go along with the reproductive system. And I'm calling them cool facts, but you probably don't think they're cool. But what I really mean is that they are situations that don't always occur. So it does make them kind of special, you would say. And one of those situations are multiple births. And when I say multiple births, I'm going to just talk about twins and the two types of twins. Now, we know that multiple births can consist of 3, 4, 5, 6 babies. We all heard of Octomom, but we're going to stick with just talking about two. There are two types of twins. There are identical twins or fraternal twins. Identical twins are exactly like it sounds. They are genetically identical to each other. How identical twins are created is that when one sperm fertilizes the one egg that's released during ovulation, during the menstrual cycle, when the cells start to divide by mitosis, the cell will actually, or the zygote will split and form two dividing cells so that each of those cells will undergo mitosis and go through the stages of embryonic development and eventually form two embryos. Then those embryos will both implant into the uterine lining. They'll share the same placenta, so meaning they'll have the same nutrients passing into and out of them, or nutrients in, waste out, but they will also have separate amniotic sacs, which is kind of interesting. Obviously, identical twins are genetically identical, so they are literally clones of each other. Which means they are always the same gender. Identical twins are either both male or both female. I want to throw this out here though. Identical twins genetically are identical, but do we know a way in which they could end up being not so identical? Can you think of a phenomenon that we've learned about throughout the year that would cause identical twins to not be the same people? I'm hoping right now you're thinking to yourself, yes, Miss Coretto, I do know this. I know that genes can be affected by the environment, that the expression of genes can be modified. Genes can be turned on, they can be turned off, they can be turned up, and they can be turned down by the environment. So even though identical twins are identical and they share the same placenta, even during embryonic development, they still can have modification of those genes, which creates them to be kind of different people. Okay, here are some pictures of identical twins. These are real pictures. Well, the one on the top left is real. There was a scientist, and I can't remember his name, who paired with a photographer to take these amazing photographs of fetuses in utero. Here it would be in early embryonic development, and you can see the two amniotic sacs with the growing embryos. And then obviously a diagram here. Notice one placenta. Each have their own umbilical cord, but in separate amniotic sacs. The other type of twins are fraternal twins. Fraternal twins were when two eggs are fertilized by two separate sperms. So for some chance, and there is a genetic component to this, I believe, for a woman to release two eggs during that ovulation stage of their menstrual cycle. So there's two eggs in the fallopian tube, and they are fertilized by two separate sperm. And therefore, two embryos will grow and they'll embed into the uterine lining. They will have two separate placentas and they will have two separate amniotic sacs. So that's a key difference between a fraternal and an identical twin, besides the fact that fraternal twins are genetically different. And fraternal twins can be different or the same sex. Obviously, really, a fraternal twin is nothing more than you or one of your siblings, if you have any. They're more closely related than you and your siblings. However, they shared your mother's uterus for 9 months. That's what makes them the twins, because it's just the random combination of a sperm and an egg. So those are just some cases of fraternal and identical twins. Here it's just showing the one egg, one sperm, which makes these two twins clones of each other. And then we have two eggs, two sperm, two different fetuses, genetically different from each other as well. And again, down here, just showing in the uterus how the attachment would look. Now, this doesn't look so right here, because this should have a division of the amniotic sac. So this diagram is a little bit erred here. So we'll just disregard this diagram. So that leads me to the next kind of situation when we talk about reproduction is what we call reproductive technology. Did you know that 1 out of 4 adults are reproductively challenged, which means that might be 1 out of 4 couples now that I say that. Couples that are trying to conceive a baby, 1 out of 4 of them will have issues doing so. So science and all the advancements in technology we have has developed these types of techniques that allow people to make babies the not so old-fashioned way. One of those is called in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization is a test tube baby. Even though the baby literally isn't made in a test tube per se, but okay, sorry about the blooper in the video. I got caught up because I thought to myself, wait, is it really in a test tube? I technically don't know. So what I did is I stopped and I looked it up, and all it says when I did some research is that it's in a laboratory dish. So definitely could be in a test tube or not, it just depends. But anyways, what happens is they remove sperm from the male and they remove the egg from the female, and they combine the egg and the sperm in a petri dish, and then they stimulate it to divide, and then when it gets to a certain stage of development, they can insert that embryo at whatever stage back into the mother and then implant into the mother, hopefully into her uterine lining, and she'll carry the fetus till term. In vitro fertilization is a very expensive process. It's a very time-consuming process. I'll just be honest, I've had several friends who have gone through in vitro fertilization. It doesn't always work, unfortunately, and for the woman, it requires a lot of dedication to taking hormones, because if you remember, when the menstrual cycle or the thickening of the uterine lining is all about hormones and feedback mechanisms, and typically once the embryo implants, the uterine lining has thickened appropriately because of the hormones the embryo produces. So what women have to do is they have to give themselves injections of medicines that will allow that uterine lining to thicken, so when the embryo is implanted that they can maintain that uterine lining. So there's a lot to it. It's not an easy process. It's fairly invasive because obviously a woman has to have the eggs retrieved. So they have to get to the ovaries to retrieve the eggs. They have to have the sperm donation from the father. And I know this too is when they analyze the eggs, they analyze the sperm to make sure they're the best choice. And then once they fertilize them, they do several, and they analyze the zygotes too to see genetically how well they look and how good they look. And I don't know what good means in the genetic world to a scientist doing this kind of work, and then once they get a select few, they will implant typically 2 or 3, hoping that one will take. I'm going to pause it now, and I'd like you and your partner, if you're working with a partner, to kind of go through these videos about in vitro fertilization and take a minute and watch those and just talk about it with each other. So after learning about in vitro, I want you just to be aware that in vitro is one of the solutions to reproductive challenges. It's an option. There are some other options, and typically what I notice is in vitro seems to kind of be the final option for couples that are challenged, because they can start with an intrauterine insemination. So these are some other technologies. That would be where they actually insert the sperm into the female's reproductive tract artificially, so they can take out that whole piece of how the vaginal canal is hostile to the sperm and alleviate their whole trip from the vaginal canal through the cervix and get them right to the uterus. So that's an option. They can also, women can take certain medications that stimulate egg maturation. So maybe they'll produce 3 or 4 eggs a month, so that their chances are better of having one fertilized. Egg retrieval is part of in vitro, where they literally go in and retrieve the eggs. There's also egg donations. So if you are a woman who's at an age where you don't have any viable eggs left, there are younger women who have been paid to donate their eggs, and you can use somebody else's egg, and the same thing goes for sperm. So you could literally go pick an egg and a sperm, and you could have a baby made based on your picks. And with that situation, it involves some type of surrogacy, and a surrogate mother is somebody that carries a zygote to embryo to fetus of somebody else's. So if you, let's say you and your husband can't have babies together, or you and your wife can't, you could have an egg and sperm donation from somebody anonymous, and you could have them technically implanted into somebody else to carry your baby. So lots of options out there nowadays. So those are just some solutions to reproductive challenges, just in case they pop up in maybe a reading passage on the regions. And finally, the last little piece I'm going to mention is diagnostics. And what that means is, how do doctors check for problems that might be associated with fetal development? And there's just a few things here I just want to mention. We've all heard of ultrasounds. Ultrasounds, they take a wand and they rub it across the baby, or not the baby, geez, the mother's uterus, and what they'll look is for growth, a new position. And this is how they also can determine the gender at a certain age. They can also see if the mother has enough amniotic fluid. They could also find out whether or not sometimes the cord can be knotted or can be wrapped around the fetus in some areas. So ultrasounds are a diagnostic test that happens at many stages through the gestational period for a woman. Now, the next two are more invasive and typically aren't done unless something is of very much concern, and some people might actually deny having this, and those are called amniocentesis and chorionic villus sampling. And this involves actually inserting a needle into the uterus. You'll see on the bottom left here, pretty large needle into the uterus. Obviously they do an ultrasound while this is happening so that the baby doesn't get punctured with the needle. They'll remove the amniotic fluid, and that amniotic fluid is going to have cells of the fetus in there. And so they can then take out those, the chromosomes of themselves, do a karyotype. We've learned about this word before, where they put the pictures of chromosomes on a chart, and then they can look for genetic defects. And the same thing goes with villus sampling, where they take a tissue sample from the chorion, which is part of the I think it's part of the uterus itself that reflects the baby. I could be wrong about that, but anyways, these are just a couple ways that genetic defects can be detected. Ultrasounds is really the primary means for diagnosing anything that's developmentally wrong as the baby progresses. So those are just a couple tests that are done throughout fetal development, and that concludes our reproduction unit. I hope you guys have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.